So today I'm going to do an ink painting using a nib dip pen and some water-soluble black ink. I'm just gonna get some ink on my pen here, and I'm not gonna do a pencil sketch first. I'm just gonna dive right in. Now I'm gonna do a very loose drawing here, so I'm gonna just kind of almost like I'm doing a contour drawing here. There's a lot of texture within this flower. Now I'm using kind of a larger nib, so I'm getting quite a bit of ink down, and I'm planning on using a wash as well. So my ink does not need to be perfect here, which takes a lot of pressure off of me and kind of makes this a more fun drawing, honestly. So I'm really just looking at the different petals here, and I'm adding them in. There we go. So as we're getting towards the back side of the flower, we get a little bit of a change in the direction here. So these ones are nice and big and long, a little bit longer than the front ones. They're also upright a little bit more. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, but I do want to kind of follow these rules. Now we have a more complicated flower back here. So our petals kind of overlap. And here I have kind of the back side of a flower coming in. Again, I don't need this to be perfect, so I'm just going to kind of loosely draw these shapes in here. Kind of tuck behind this flower here. And let's see. I'm just going to throw this one in front. There we go. So these are all kind of bending forward a little bit. Again, very different. So I'm looking at the contour shape and just kind of leaning into that a little bit here. And then as we come up here, the petals start to become a little bit more like you'd expect. Still have a bit of a curve. I really like these petals, though they are challenging to draw. But that's okay. That's okay. Today's drawing is going to be really loose, and I'm not expecting it to be perfect. Sometimes those looser drawings can be kind of nice. All right, then this one just kind of comes out. There we go. So that's the main part of that flower. We can see that flower down into here. I'm gonna put one more petal here. I haven't refilled my ink yet, which is actually quite impressive. There we go. And these petals kind of feed up here. There, little gaps down there, fine. I'll just do a little bit of texture. I don't want to go too far with it. I am anticipating that my wash is going to do most of this kind of work for me. And then there's some petals in here I should probably throw in. There we go. All right. Okay, now the inside here, this gets a little dark. A little bit more there. We can't see the inside there, though there is a couple of really nice thin kind of petals just poking out here. My ink is finally starting to run, so I'm just going to grab a little bit more here. That's pretty good coverage, though, for that. So this stem is going to come down, and this stem is coming down as well. Now these are going to be in a mason jar, and my mason jar, again, just going nice and loose here. I have quite a nice reference. I've gone and made my flowers just a little bigger than the reference, which is absolutely fine. But I will have to just shorten my vase here. Now there's those little rims. Just adding a little hint of that shape here. Here we go. And this one here. And now we're transitioning down into the neck and out and down. So I'm going to try to mirror that on this side. Easier said than done, of course. a little bit off, but you know what? I'm okay with it. Now in my reference, the jar is quite large, but I'm just gonna kind of finish it off here, a little bit rounded base. And within that base, I see there's a couple of different shapes happening. And we have to continue our stems down, but I don't really want to be too perfect about them. Now my water line needs to kind of follow the shape of the jar. So this is going to come down. Now I'm going to kind of play into refraction here just a little bit and angle that so it breaks a little bit there. This one's coming down this direction here. And I'm going to play again into the refraction idea here. And so this one angles this way. Let's see. I'm going to imagine this is going to kind of do the same thing here. So I'll do something like that. We're going to add some leaves and stuff too. So my obscured guess is going to be hidden a little bit here. Here's a leaf. Got a leaf that's kind of coming out of the water. Again, we'll have a refracted kind of shape there, so it might not continue perfectly. Little leaf coming out here. And I'm cutting through here, so these are going to be quite dark. But yeah, we're going to be adding a wash, which will make it, you'll see in a sec. It'll kind of obscure those lines here. So these are the main lines. Now I'm going to just add a little kind of edge. This is the thickness of the jar here. And a couple of little layers here within my water that I'm seeing. So it's all line work at this point, but when we get into our wash, we're going to be adding just a few more things. I'm going to throw another little leaf in here. Kind of pulling down. Feel like we need a little bit more going on in there. All right, these are quite dark. I'm just going to deepen those right now. So when I get in there with my water, this is water-soluble ink, which means that it will bleed. And I originally didn't like the idea of that because I'm kind of really like control when I'm doing artwork. So I asked my husband to buy me ink, and he did, but he ended up buying water-soluble ink instead of the kind that doesn't run in water. And at first I was like, oh man, well, I'll still give it a go, and it's fine. Maybe I'll let my kids use it, but I actually love it. So happy little accidents. To quote artist of our time, good old oh goodness, why can't I think of his name? Bob. Oh, that's embarrassing. Bob Ross. Oh my goodness. Making art accessible to everybody, right? Oh, wonderful. Okay, so boop, boop. I think that's pretty good. I'm just gonna put my pen down. I have a little bit of water here, nothing special. Oh, I see my paper went over. There we go. I have another painting here. I just don't want to get it all wrecked. And I'm just going to pick a really simple brush. So I found my brush. It's one of my it's an older brush. It's got a little bit of damage, but it should be fine. Now what I'm looking for here primarily is light and shadow. And a lot of this is dry, and the ink doesn't bleed quite as much when it's dry, but you will see that my colors are going to start to move. So being very careful with where I'm putting this. Now this again was quite dark. But there are a few highlights in that space too, so just being aware of that. These areas here were a little bit darker, so you can see that ink already running. You can also see where I've ran out of ink in a few spaces, so I'll need to go in and kind of get those activated here. Oops, so that kind of pulled in, and that's okay. Ink behaves very similar to watercolor in how it moves, and also in how you can kind of pick it up. So if I don't want this to be as dark as that, I'll just kind of dab it. And as long as it's wet, you can control that. Now I've picked up quite a bit of the ink there, so I will go back in and I'm gonna kind of pull that down. There we go. Again, I don't want to do too much. These are light colored flowers, but they're not white flowers, but they are lightly colored. So Push those back a bit more. These are kind of in the shadow there. This one would have a bit of a shadow. Yeah, these would be a little shadowy there. Perfect. All right, so just focusing on lights and darks for now. Pull some of this out. You can pull out paint just like with watercolor. Pull out the ink with a clean brush, just a little bit though. It isn't as forgiving, but a little bit forgiving. All right, now I'm going to go into here. This was actually a little bit darker around the edge. When you have something transparent like this, you tend to have some pretty aggressive highlights and shadows. And the light will just travel right through your object as well. So it doesn't really follow the rules that you'll be used to with lighting with a solid object. And again, all of these were quite dark, so I'm just gonna, and this ink is wet. You can see the movement of that ink. It's quite wet there. All right, and that's good. Like, I'll be adding ink as I go here, and I actually really enjoy to add a little bit of the ink. But it helps to camouflage those areas where I just kind of disregarded the line of the jar and just started adding things in. All right, gonna give a little shadow into those areas, a little bit around the back there. The shadows are gonna help make the highlights feel more bright. So sometimes by making something dark, you actually make it feel lighter in a weird way, if that makes any sense. And yeah, there's going to be kind of shadows and highlights and reflections all over the place here. So just add a couple of those little dots. And we're going to have a cast shadow as well. Cast shadow is the shadow created by the vase, by the flowers. But in a cast shadow in an object that is transparent, you also have light. Now, I'm not going to be so particular about this painting that I'm going to necessarily follow that rule. I think I'll just give myself a nice shadow here. And I'm going to start that right now. So my shadow is going to come pretty much right at me, if you can see it there. Let's move my cup a bit. Right now, we've just picked up a little bit of that water. Now, if I do want to try and control where my shadow goes, I'll just add water and not have water in other places. So it'll kind of a little bit of a streakiness to it here. And then I will add my ink. Now, technically the shadow should come out just a little bit because it's going to be a little wider than your object. So back to my pen. I haven't even cleaned this pen. Yeah, there's still ink on that pen. So what I'm going to do is just redraw that base. And because there's ink, this is wet ink into water, we should get quite a bit of movement here. And if we don't, I'll just take my brush and force it. But I'm seeing a little bit of movement anyway. I don't want to draw those lines with a ink pen because they will kind of leave a texture. So what I'm going to do is just try to activate this a little bit more and just get a little bit more movement in there. Here we go. I don't want it to bleed up into that space. At least not too much. There we go. So that kind of gives us a little bit of highlight and shadow. Just clean some of that up and allow it to move just a little bit better there. Maybe I'll dab the very back end here too, just so it doesn't have a harsh base. And then there are a few areas here that I think are still wet. I kind of wanted more. Oh, yeah, see, that's wet. So when you see your ink moving like that, you know it's still wet. So there's a few spots in here that I just really wanted to lean into those shadows. So going to add a little extra ink there. Now I'm surprised it's not taking off as much as I was anticipating it would. So it must be a little more dry. So I'll just go in and drag my brush and kind of force it to move. A little bit more like painting, but that's all right. Oof, that's aggressive. Boop, boop, boop. All right. Yeah, so a nice simple kind of wash. Nothing too complicated here. I can kind of soften things a bit more. Boop. 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 I like letting the ink do its thing, so I don't want to force it too much. There we go. So I'm just outlining a little bit of these areas just a bit more, and in doing so, the ink is going to move into those spots where I just added a little bit of water. But yeah, when I was doing my wash, I did also dilute the ink that was already there. So it is good to kind of go back in and redo some of your foreground lines so that they have that boldness that you originally had. So I'm not going to redo everything, but just the lines that are a little bit more important. This one I kind of regret adding in, so I'm just going to see if I can lift that a bit. There we go. And this got a little carried away too, so just tap a little bit of those back petals there. Boop, boop. And that's kind of cool. I feel like maybe that's enough. Don't want to overdo it. Got a nice signature. Here we go. Just a nice simple wash, nothing too complicated. Pretty straightforward, but a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed that. Water-soluble ink, again, not the kind that doesn't bleed with water. You want the kind that does. This is the ink I used. It says non-waterproof black ink right on it, right? So it is not waterproof. So yeah, it'll bleed with water, but it gives you this kind of nice wash effect, and it's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this, and hope to draw with you again soon. If you want to see more artwork, you can check out my Instagram at creations_by_Kendra, or you can find me on Facebook at Creations by Kendra. Of course, like, subscribe, all that stuff, and hope to see you soon. Bye.